The 40k Noise Marine is, to a whole bunch of us, a cherished part of the game. Loved broadly by tons of Slaanesh fans, myself included. This mini has always kind of been on my list as one of those I'd really love to paint that one day kind of minis. But as lovely as the official sculpt is, Polish company Spellcrow also does some really nice third-party alternatives for the Noise Marines. They do a few different sculpts, and I've had my eye on those quite a bit recently too. You may recall from a few months ago that I have been considering an Emperor's Children army. So with that said, you can imagine how delighted I must have been when long-term friend and customer Z decided to commission me to paint one of these Spellcrow alternative sculpts. This was an opportunity to get my hands on a miniature that I'd really wanted to paint for myself for a long time, and it kind of just gives me an excuse to get it done. The alternative sculpt is so full of character. It's got such a different feel and aesthetic to it to a Games Workshop miniature. And with the addition of a custom 3D sculpted and printed head that Z had made especially for the job, that's just going to add to the awesome and make this a really, really fun piece. So enough talk, let's get down to brass tacks. What are my thoughts on how I'm going to handle this? Okay, first things first, I definitely want all of those super bright pinks, blues, greens, those crazy neon colours. I think Noise Marines are one of the few exceptions in miniature painting where we really want to see a ridiculous amount of busyness. So leaning into lots of different bright colours and textures is a really cool idea. What's more, as I'm working on those brightly coloured areas, I want to push some good loud contrast as well in my shading. So instead of shading like right down to blacks and potentially desaturating or dulling things, I kind of go in with this universal blue tone shade and I start hitting that into all of the areas. The Spellcrow sculpt happens to have some really, really nice curves on the armor panels that wouldn't normally be present there, and they give me some amazing places to actually place some good contrast into. Another thing I'll definitely be lifting from the GW original box art are those animal prints. I just think they're so quintessentially Noise Marine that it would genuinely be remiss not to include them. That said, I don't want anyone to at me in the comments and say that this is a straight copy of GW's box art, because I wouldn't do that anyway. It wouldn't be very interesting for you to watch. So what I'm actually going to do here is swap the leopard print for snow leopard print and the zebra print for tiger print, so that I'm using kind of the same patterns and the same colours but in a different way, and this sort of shows you just how universal this kind of stuff can be, and you can just switcheroo it on the fly. I also think it's super important to balance very garish, very loud paint jobs like this with at least some plainly coloured areas to kind of break things up, and some simpler stuff as well, just to not give the eye too much to look at once, so that you can kind of distinguish the different crazy loud areas. So I really like the idea of all of the sort of audio equipment on here having that kind of classic black Tolex look that amplifiers and speaker cabinets and things like that tend to have. And then I'm a big fan of Marshall amps. In fact, when I used to play guitar regularly, Marshall was my preferred brand of amplification. So I decided to get this kind of really desaturated shiny gold to go in on all of the sort of gold hardware parts to kind of mimic that black and gold Marshall look. Okay, the face is an interesting one, because this is a custom sculpted and home printed product here that we're adding into a professionally produced resin miniature. Now obviously what that means is that we're not going to quite have the same depth of detail in the face. The features are going to be a bit shallower, and it could be very easy when combining that with a very crisp, very edgy sort of sculpt that the face could kind of look out of place. And instead of viewing that as like something to be down about or like, you know, sulking over it, I think it's important to sort of just view that as a painting challenge. If you're going to incorporate some of these, you know, more sort of home designed 3D print components, then that can sometimes be an issue. And so I decided to really lean into that and just make it fun. So I went with just a lot of hand painted detail in the face. You know, I really sort of used blue inks to accent around the eyes and around the mouth area. I built up my highlights a little bit more in a shapely fashion to sort of contour the face a little bit, sort of similarly to how you would do makeup when you're contouring your cheekbones. I kind of looked at the highlights in a similar way to that, where I'm actually trying to sort of change the presentation of the shape of the face. Things like the actual shape of the eye itself and painting in eyeliner, that kind of stuff. And by adding all of these things together, you can take a very simple facial sculpt and turn it into something fun and interesting to paint and different. And that actually ended up being one of the most enjoyable parts of painting this whole miniature. And the last thing I need to do before I get this all glued together is the guitar. And I ummed and ahed over this quite a bit. There was a lot of different approaches that I could have taken to it. The main thing in my head was that I wanted it to read very clearly, very immediately as a guitar. I wanted it to feel like a real guitar. In the case of the way these are sculpted, they're all sort of sculpted to be basses because it's a bit hard to get 6 strings into, you know, a neck that's about 1 millimeter thick at its widest part. And I sort of thought about a few classic finishes, you know, Tobacco Burst from Gibson or Seafoam Green from Fender, maybe like the Candy Apple Metallic Red. And sort of looking at all of those things, I thought it could be a bit difficult to get them to read how I want them to read. So I just went with a really nice, simple, straightforward gloss red gold hardware and tried to make it have that kind of look of an actual lacquered guitar. The neck itself I left matte, and then everything else was given a coat of gloss varnish. And I really dig how that came out, actually, considering the options that were available to me. I think that was fairly smart for how to handle it. Okay, so obviously you've seen a lot of nice little snippets here of what I've been doing and why I've been doing it, but you haven't seen the culmination of all of that effort. So let's try a little spinny reveal video for our Noise Marine, and let's take a look at what we got. So I think you can see that I was very clearly inspired by the GW box art here, and that certainly led the design cues going into this paint scheme. But I've presented everything in a bit of a different way, taken a bit of a different approach to it, and tried to look at things, you know, a little bit outside of the box, applied some of my own style and some of my own thoughts and feelings to things. And I maintain that that's a really interesting way to paint miniatures, to take references, things like box art or other examples of painted miniatures, and to sort of just put your own leanings on them. Can be a really fulfilling part of the creative process of getting a miniature painted, and it can be a really, really good time. In the case of this Noise Marine, it was a great time. I had really, really good fun painting this, and it was a lovely day's work. So folks, please do let me know what you think in the comments. Drop a comment below and tell me about your Noise Marines. Let me know what you maybe have done differently that you think is pretty cool with yours, if you've leaned heavily into conversions or anything like that, or if you just want to chat about miniatures in general. That's what the comment section is for. You can of course also find me on social media. There are links in the description to that. If you liked the video, do not forget to hit that thumbs up button. That's very important for helping me get seen, and you can subscribe to the channel and enable notifications if you want to stay up to date on what I'm doing here on YouTube. If you love the content and you want to support its creation, I do have a Patreon. You can pledge to that for as little as $1 American a month, and again, there's a link to that in the description. So folks, I'm going to get out of here right now, roll the end credits, thank my existing patrons, but I will see you in the next one. Everybody, thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.